Welcome to Education Matters. It's another special edition on teacher evaluations. And on this episode, we'll be focusing in on student growth and how it ties to teacher evaluations. And with me is Tim Matheney, who is the Director of Evaluation for the New Jersey Department of Education. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
One of the key concepts behind the teacher evaluations, Achieve NJ, is student growth and measuring teacher evaluation, tying it to the growth of the student. What does that mean?
Sure. For some teachers in the state, teachers who are in grades 4 through 8, teaching math and or language arts, they will be receiving what we call a student growth percentile score. And that is a score that is based on how far their students grow over the course of the year, and that's measured by the NJ Ask for now. Eventually, that growth will be measured by the new slate of tests that will be rolling out in 2015 called the PARCC tests. People may have heard that term. The PARCC tests are closely aligned with the Common Core approach to instruction and curriculum. So we are in a transition period, but for now, those student growth percentile scores will be based on the NJ Ask.
Tim, you talked about SGP. Well, actually, you said student growth percentiles, which is better known as SGPs. You know, in education, we like acronyms.
Yes.
I just want to reemphasize. You said that's for the standardized. That's for math and language arts right now. Is that correct?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And as we move forward, there'll be a little bit more testing with PARCC, which is the new system that we're moving to in 2015.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
As we move forward in this, what about teachers who do not have that standardized test?
Students who are not assessed by the NJ Ask, so teachers who are outside of the elementary grades, high school teachers, for example, early childhood teachers, they will be measured primarily for student growth by a concept we call student growth objectives. And in fact, all teachers in the state have to set a student growth objective. Teachers in grades 4 through 8, math and language arts, are going to have measures of both student growth percentile and student growth objectives. But those teachers who are outside of the SGP realm will have 2 student growth objectives, and those are derived through a consultative process between the principal and the teacher, and through that process they decided on an appropriate assessment to measure that individual teacher's growth with their students. So that type of assessment could be a rubric applied to key skills in an art class, or it could be a final exam. It could be items for an AP class based on AP type questions given by a teacher at the end of the year. There are all kinds of different assessments that would be appropriate in laying the basis for a student growth objective.
Now, if we're measuring growth, so we're not, if a student, say the NJS, is not proficient, mm-hmm. but if we're measuring growth, can the teacher still be given a good evaluation because the student grew? Do you have a way to measure that?
I think that's an absolutely critical question because we're really looking at reorienting how we look at teaching performance and school performance from a proficiency-based focus to a growth-based focus. So without digging into the math behind SGP, and I encourage any interested board member or any interested educator, parent to look at the DOE's website. We have great specific information on the math behind the SGP. But keeping it at an easier level than that, through this process, students are compared to their academic peers across the state. And through that academic peer comparison, we're discerning how far a student grew in comparison to his or her peers. So a student who's struggling in school is going to be compared to other students in the state who also are facing those similar kinds of struggles. And we're going to see how far those kinds of kids grow in relation to one another. And students who are doing a great job in school are going to be compared to their academic peers and how far they grow over the course of the year. So by doing that, we're not holding teachers accountable to take a student who is facing really major difficulties in school and seeing if they meet an arbitrary proficiency level. On the contrary, we're seeing how far can that teacher take that student from day one of the school year to the last day of the school year. So it's really, you might think of it as distance as opposed to crossing a particular finish line.
I'm a teacher, and maybe I have a student in my class who just, maybe their parents are getting divorced that year, or something's traumatic going on, they're sick. And so probably no matter what I do that year, they're not going to achieve. Will I be held accountable, or is it figured out in the system?
Well, I would say two things about that. One is that, again, we're measuring kids compared to their academic peers. So kids who are facing a lot of obstacles to their learning will be compared to kids who are similarly situated. But secondly, I would actually challenge your assumption. I happen to think that many kids who are going through distressed times see school as a refuge. So once they walk into that schoolhouse door, they are in a warm, nurturing environment where actually they can really succeed. And with an effective teacher in front of them, it doesn't matter what bags they're carrying with them to the schoolhouse door. If they get into a good school with a good teacher, they can learn at the same rate as any other student. And that's borne out by the research.
I guess it could also, from my example, it could go the opposite way, where with the previous year the student had those issues, they were maybe sick. This year they're healthy, so now they're growing, and I get credit for maybe extra growth that I really didn't have much to do with.
Well, you know, any time a teacher gets credit for taking a student a far distance in their learning, I say all the power to them. You know, I think teachers do amazing work. I look at the teachers who have impacted my life, and I must say that there's a reason that I'm here today, and that's because of the hard work of teachers.
I want to go back to SGO's student growth objectives, because you talked about that, and I thought that was pretty important. It would seem to me that it's really important about creating those, that dialogue between the principal and the teacher, so that they're not unattainable, but also not too easy to reach. Is that a key to that?
Yes. The language we use as part of our training is ambitious yet achievable. So we want teachers to develop SGO goals that are a bit of a stretch but still achievable. And they create a scoring system so that they're rewarded if they do stretch themselves and achieve those further goals than they might initially feel uncomfortable with. So SGOs are assessed on 4 tiers, and you know, a teacher who gets a 3 out of 4 is an effective teacher in my mind. A teacher who has challenged themselves and reached that higher standard deserves the extra credit they would get by earning a 4.
Could you explain what those 4 tiers are, each one? So that,
Well, they're attainment levels of the goal. So a 4 would be exceptional attainment, a 3 would be attainment, a 3 would be partial attainment, and a 1 would be insufficient attainment of that goal.
In the pilot districts, how has this worked? Has that changed the conversation between the administration and the teachers?
We found several pilot districts that really engaged in this work in a really meaningful way. And what they reported to us is that process of principals and teachers and supervisors, curriculum directors sitting down, thinking about what do they want students to learn and how are they going to know by the end of the year whether they've learned that material or not, is probably the most critical conversation they can have. The instrument in this case is the student growth objective process of making sure that those conversations occur.
Teachers are evaluated on observation and also on the SGOs and SGPs. What percentage, you know,
Sure.
What's the breakdown on that?
A majority of teachers in the state will be assessed by what we call teacher practice, so that's the observation process, and student growth objectives. The teacher practice observational component is 85% of their evaluation. The growth objective is 15% of their evaluation. The number of teachers in the state that will be assessed in that manner is about 85% of them, 80 to 85% of them. We do have those 4th through 8th grade math and language arts teachers who will get an SGP score, And they'll have three components for their evaluation. So they'll have the SGP component in addition to growth objectives and teacher practice. And that will be weighted 30% of their final evaluation.
Will it those percentages stay about the same, or do we over time want to bring in more evaluation tied to the learning of the student?
Sure. We absolutely foresee in the future, though we don't have any tight timeline on this, as you said, tying teachers' performance more closely to those achievement outcomes. But initially, we want to make sure that we're reasonable and provide time for teachers to get used to the student growth objective process. That's brand new in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So we want to give an opportunity for teachers to learn that process and enhance their knowledge of that process so that we get better and better goal setting. So I do think over time you may see the weight applied to growth objectives increase. But again, we're going to monitor that on a year-to-year basis. And it's more important that we have thoughtful, careful implementation than rushing into a system that's going to hold educators accountable in a way that we're not comfortable with.
Tim, I'd like to thank you for talking about student growth and how it's tied to teacher learning. That brings us to a conclusion of this Education Matters on Achieve NJ and student growth. Thank you for joining us. And as Tim said, we have links to this the New Jersey Department of Education on this subject below. Thank you.